Like I said, it's a briefer sermon today, as we do have a baptism and an exciting celebration of new life in the church. Today's story is about gratitude, thankfulness, and it's probably one you've heard. Right? The 10 lepers, and the way we frame the story is 9 are ungrateful, one said thank you, and that's kind of true. That's how the story goes. But there's some reasons why the 9 didn't come back that I think it's helpful for us to know. So let me just tell the story with some context real quick, and then we'll get into the gratitude part. Jesus is on his way from Galilee to Jerusalem. Now, there were 3 roads that Jewish people would take to go from Galilee to Jerusalem. 2 of them went, one to the east, one to the west, and they were kind of the longer way, but they were considered the safer way. And I don't know if you've ever been, driving somewhere, there's a certain area you want to avoid, or there's certain things you want to avoid. So maybe you go a little bit out of your way, but it's an easier way. It's a safer way. So most Jewish people, if they were going from Galilee to Jerusalem, would go either to the east and go along the Mediterranean and then turn in towards Jerusalem, or they would go to the west, cross the Jordan River, go through Jordan, and then turn east into Jerusalem. There was one other way they could go, and that was the straightest, most straightforward way. It was through Samaria. But the Jewish people didn't like going that way because they didn't feel it was safe. The Samaritans and the Jews didn't get along really well, and there was a lot of tension between the 2 groups, and they felt if we were the only Jewish people staying in a Samaritan hotel overnight, wasn't necessarily going to be the safest place. So they would prefer to go the longer ways because there were larger Jewish populations in the cities they would stay. Jesus almost always goes the most direct way through the part of town his disciples remind him he's supposed to avoid. And that's where he is in today's story. And while he's on that road, I imagine probably holy people didn't necessarily go on that road. It wasn't a road traveled by prophets and preachers that often. The lepers get word that Jesus is coming, and they come and they approach him asking for mercy. Now, lepers had a rule back then. You're not going to believe this. I had to triple check it to make sure it was true. But the Jewish rabbis recommended that the lepers stay 6 feet away from people who didn't have leprosy. So that's where we got that number from, basically, during COVID, 6 feet. We just went off Jewish leprosy rules from the New Testament. So they were on top of it 2,000 years ago. They had that whole 6 feet thing figured out. So 6 feet, like a tall person's body length, they had to stay away from people who were not leprous. So the gospel tells us the lepers came up to Jesus keeping their distance, right? So saying they're honoring. They're not being so aggressive that they're getting in his space. They're keeping their distance. They're coming respectfully, but asking for mercy. And Jesus says, go show yourselves to the priest and make yourself, and you'll be clean. And they do. Now, here's the thing about leprosy in the time that Jesus lived. The priests were really the people who could give you the inspection and the certificate that says you're clean, that you could re-enter society. Sometimes like you can't go back to work until you get a doctor's note or something. Same idea, right? But the priests were the ones that had the note. And so the priests had to inspect a person's skin to see if there was any signs of leprosy. And if there wasn't, if they were clean, they would do the ritual purification. They would give a certificate of sorts that said this person is now clean. And that person could re-enter society. They could work again. They could re-engage with their family. Now, if you were a leper, you couldn't be around anyone except other lepers. So that means if you had parents, you couldn't be around your parents. You couldn't be around your siblings. If you were married and had children and then got leprosy, you couldn't be around your family. So the lepers go, and in obeying Jesus' command to go, they're healed. The Greek, the way the scripture is written says, and in the going, they were healed. Jesus said, go do this. They listened, they obeyed, and in doing it, they were healed. And so you can imagine those lepers were excited to get back to life. I mean, could you think about your life? and the people you love. And if you had to, for a year, not see them, not hug them, not be close to them, how excited you might be to get back to them. So you can understand why the other lepers are kind of racing to the priest to get that note. It says, we can go back to our families, we can go back to our homes. But one of them, before he does that, just stops back to find Jesus to say thank you. And Jesus makes a comment. He says, weren't there 10? Only one says thanks, and he was a Samaritan too. And the Jewish people are like, the Samaritans, they don't understand anything about religion. They're not faithful. They don't know what they're doing. And Jesus is like, but the one person who had gratitude in their heart to say thank you to God before they got on with their life is a Samaritan. Interesting. It's a great reminder for us. All of us have really, really busy lives. And probably like the lepers, more times than not, we go to God when there's crisis as opposed to when there's reasons to be thankful. Now, I hope as I grow in my faith, I will be a person that goes to God in thanksgiving more than I go to him in crisis. But if I were being honest with you, there are times when I pray the hardest usually are when there's crisis. My most heartfelt prayers generally are not prayers of thanks. They're prayers of need. Just like the lepers. I would come to him and finding myself healed, just want to run back and get back to my life. But it's a good reminder for us. All of us have busy lives and things we want to, that we need to get back to take a moment and be thankful. It pleases God when we come to him in gratitude as well. We see that in the story. It pleases God when we come to him and just say thank you for the things we have, for the blessings we have, for the graces we receive, just like that leper did. It touches his heart. Just like I imagine if you've ever given a gift and got a thoughtful thank you in return, you didn't do it for the thank you, but the thank you that you got kind of touched your heart. God's having the same moment with this one leper. So a reminder for us in the midst of our busy life to just stop for a moment every now and then and give thanks. It pleases God when we give thanks. A great segue for today and heading into baptisms, in our church, we're really blessed with new life. And I just wanted to give us a reason to give thanks at St. Albans. I did some looking. I love statistics. They're boring, but man, sometimes you can get some good information from them. And I saw in our diocese, the Diocese of West Texas, the average church does 4 baptisms a year. Right? So you know how averages work. Some churches do way more, some churches do less. Some churches probably do 0. And we're having 4 today. Right? Earlier this month, we were blessed to have a baptism during our Wednesday night youth. We have more families asking for baptism that are coming later on in the year. It's a blessing. And so I think as a church, it's a reason and call for us to be thankful about the new life that's coming in our church. And we get to be a part of the beginning of these families' journey in their life in Christ.